When Zamir asked me to do this morning's seminar, I jumped at the opportunity. And why? Because I am also now doing a little project with UTT in the area of outreach and a couple of other things, but primarily outreach. And I have always been really impressed by the vision for this school, and also, of course, by the number of phenomenal women who are on faculty and on staff here. I've had the opportunity to interact with many of you, and you guys really kick butt. So give yourselves a round of applause, please. I'm sure a lot of you know a little bit about my story, because for the last 20 years or so, I've talked ad nauseam, largely about who I am. But today, I wanted to focus on something that Zamir and his team brought to my attention in terms of how they branded me for today's seminar, and that is as a global brand. You know, in all honesty, I do think about my branding, and I have for years now, even before Universe. I didn't know at the time that's exactly what I was doing, but now in hindsight, I appreciate that. And only when I saw that written, I thought about the fact that, yes, you know, I am a global brand, a small one. I'm not Coca-Cola or Bob Marley. But I think all of us, in our own way, have our brand. And it forced me in thinking about how I came to this point in my life, how I achieved this, how as Miss Universe 1998, do you guys realize that's 21 years ago? Yes, I have managed to stay current. And that, honestly, was not a well-structured plan. So I will share with you this morning why I think, in thinking about this topic and how I have been described by UTT, why that is. And hopefully you learn a little bit from my experience, and then of course you're going to open the floor so I learn from you. I was very fortunate as a child to have two amazing parents who wanted a boy and a girl. And I happened to be their first, and the boy, Wendell sometimes, and my little sister Dionise, who is also Wendy, because our parents treated us very much as two very distinct individuals. And my dad particularly, I mean, they were married for 10 years before they had me, so he was really excited to finally have a kid. Took me everywhere with him. And I mean literally everywhere, sometimes to my mom's horror. And what I learned from my dad early o'clock without recognizing it was the value of hard work. My father was a fireman, later became an engineer. The government of Trinidad and Tobago sent him to the UK to study over a period of a few years. And he stayed with the fire service. But always he had a million other things going on professionally. You know, he's also an electrician, he's a mechanic. My father's now 84, and last year at 83, he rewired his buddy's house, a 2-story home in Seaview Gardens in Carenage at 83. And that's just who he is. At the same time, he loves Carnival, you know, hence the fact that I've been playing every year since I was 2.5. He was a wire bender with Ken Morris's band back in the day, and then he transitioned to Hearts. That's why I still play with Hearts. And everybody else, he took a turn with Minch at one point, kind of like I do, with all the bands in Port of Spain. And my mom, and he's very much happy-go-lucky and a real limer. My mom, very much the good Catholic country girl. Loves a good time too, loves pretty things, but very, very strict. I mean, her nickname when I was a kid was "Say No to Drugs," because all mommy did was say no. Her favorite word. Of course, I found many workarounds to know. So mommy forced me to be a very good negotiator. And that discipline she instilled in my sister and I very much appreciate now. The fact that she would make me up after a hard night at Coconuts or Genesis to go to church. I would roll into the house at 5:36 and she'd be like, okay, you ready? Mass is at 7. I appreciate that very, very much now. Dad, his work ethic, I describe my father as water, which is not a terribly masculine, I think. People don't think of water. When you think of water, you don't think of strength, generally. But water is everything. It's life. It can be all-consuming, very powerful and destructive, and yet you can't exist without it. You know, that's how I feel about my dad. And he has a way of getting what he wants, which of course meant as a kid we butt heads regularly, because I also learned how to get what I want. And like water, sometimes I would rush you, and sometimes I would bob and weave, take my time, pull back a little bit to a trickle, speed things up. And a great example of that was my choices for A-levels at St. Joseph's Convent. I always loved art and fashion and law. And in the 80s, the late 80s, early 90s, fashion was not a career choice. So I'm so happy Charu's here to speak today. You know, once I've told my father as a kid, I was about 5 at the time I told him I wanted to be a lawyer, he was stuck on that. So we made a deal that if I do pursue law, he will send me to FIT in New York to do fashion after, knowing very well that I don't love school a lot, like my sister, whose joy is getting another degree, learning something new in a very formal environment. That's not me. And for A-levels, it was the first time I think I bucked him in a real way. To my parents' credit, they always gave us, as I said, the ability to make choices, but we had to live with the consequences of our choices. They would support us, but they would never clean up our mess for us. And A-levels was the first time I attempted to marry my love of law and my determination to pursue a legal education with fashion. Daddy was in Canada on a course the government of Trinidad and Tobago sent him on, and I was thrilled about that because I could have a chat with my principal at St. Joseph's Convent in choosing my subjects, and I decided I was going to do art for A-levels. And not only was I going to do art, but I was going to do fashion and surface textile design, an area of art for A-levels that St. Joseph's Convent did not offer. And I talked my way into the art program at Convent for A-levels, having not done art for O-levels. Daddy was horrified. He couldn't understand why he was being asked to buy things for silk screening and batik and so many dyes coming back from Canada. And now I realize that, like him, I was very determined that I would find my way into fashion. While I was studying at Convent from Form 2 to Form 5, I did a course in a sewing course at a school in Port of Spain called Hilaire's School of Fashion. He made me stop for O-levels because I was doing poorly in French and I had to step my game up. So I stopped that course just before I learned how to make wedding gowns and swimsuits, but I could do everything else, cut my own patterns, drape, everything. And I sort of left that alone until the opportunity came up for A-levels. And UE, during this time, I'm modeling as well, which happened in my life quite by chance, but again, following Daddy's lead. As I said, he was a mechanic, he was a fireman, and so many other things. Yes was his favorite word. And I saw many times, because I went everywhere with my dad, Daddy saying yes to things that I knew he didn't know how to do. He would figure it out. And ladies, that's a quality that men have in spades. Unbelievable confidence. I don't know what it is about our socialization that allows us to second guess ourselves constantly. Men always jump first and then figure it out. we have to see the end game often before we take that step. So I think, Dad was very instrumental, as I said, because I was part Wendy, part Wendell to him, or Wayne, or whatever it was. He, by his example, taught me to take a leap, to go for it. So I did at A-levels, and art was my best subject at A's, and I had to teach myself art because we didn't have a teacher to teach me art. I convinced Sister Paul with my training at Hilaire School of Fashion that I could pull this off. I was interested enough in the course to work hard and do it, and I did. Fast forward several years, 5 years to be exact. I'm on my way to finish completing law school, and Peter Elias says to me I should enter Miss Trinidad and Tobago. We were at a friend's wedding. We were liming partners at that point because I used to go to his little fabric store in Port of Spain, and I designed all the graduation dresses for my friends. And I said, okay. And I didn't really mean it because we were dancing and having a good time at Jennifer's wedding. And then about a month and a half later, 6 weeks later, I saw myself in the newspaper as a finalist in Miss Trinidad and Tobago. Because he had a relationship with Kim Sabini. He entered me, and there I was as one of the 12 finalists for a roll call with the media, inviting the media to come and meet the participants, the delegates of Miss Trinidad and Tobago in 1997. Panicked. I speak to my parents, I speak to the registrar at law school, and surprisingly, a lot of my friends said, don't do that, girl. If you do that, nobody will ever take you seriously. Because they'll see every time you come to court, in your black robe, they're going to see you in a bikini. Yes, many of my colleagues said that to me. Surprisingly, the registrar of law school at the time, Miss Rochford, who was fierce and fabulous, a very confident together woman, but very girly, delightfully so, said, girl, go for it. Well, if Miss Rochford says yes, by all means. And I did. Like that. I had never done pageants before. I was never into pageants. Always loved fashion, but jumped headfirst into that opportunity, and we all know how that went. It worked out very well. That's not to say that there weren't struggles along the way in getting there, but I was very, very determined to represent my country well. I left here on my mirror. Peter Elias took a photograph of it, which every now and then, anytime I'm in difficulty, the AG of the country sues me, or I'm being mashed up in the media, he would always send the 3 post-its I had on my bathroom mirror in my mother's house of the 3 reasons why I should do well at Miss Universe, why I deserved to win Miss Universe. Anytime I forget about that, he reminds me. So of the importance of visioning and going for it. Universe worked out very well. There have been other instances in my life where things have not so much. And out of those difficulties, often I have learned my best lessons. My relationship with Cyril Ross. Kieran spoke about the fact that I started the Hibiscus Foundation, and I've worked with Cyril Ross consistently for many years. That happened by chance, but the reason why I started Hibiscus was because I'd grown very attached to these young women, the kids, at the Cyril Ross Nursery, and I wanted to do something in a tangible way that would impact not only those kids, but us re-HIV. And dogmatically, that was one of the instances in which, like Daddy, I was like a rush, like the Caroni at its max heading towards the Gulf of Paria, because I was determined to get not only my kids, but Trinidadians, the kind of care that I knew is available for people living with HIV and the quality of life that everybody else enjoys. I felt that there was no reason why our population shouldn't. And when you focus and you are very determined to do something, the universe sort of conspires to make it happen. Again, a lot of doubt. You know, where are you going to find these meds for these kids? At the time we introduced those medications to the Sir Ross Nursery, it cost $4,500 per month in meds only. There's no way we would have been able to sustain that if we didn't get the support of a few organizations outside of our country. And I just decided I'm going to go for it. Everyone I came across who I thought could assist and influence, I asked. A lot of them said, yeah, sure, we'll get back to you. And they didn't. 2 people did. And that's all it took to start a clinic for young people living with HIV, which led to the government of Trinidad and Tobago, and a lot of hard work, it wasn't only me, introducing HIV meds for our population in 2000 for those of our nationals living with HIV. It was our Consul General to New York at the time who found an organization. I told him for my birthday in '99, I want the drugs that Magic Johnson is on for my children. And he came back to me, my birthday is the 4th of October. The High Commission, sorry, the consulate in New York had an event to which he invited me. And by December, I was in a meeting with him with an organization run by a Trinidadian living with HIV in New York who assisted and provided emotional support to people living with HIV in the tri-state area. And she would collect the medication that they didn't use that was still very good, but because it's a cocktail of drugs, you may react to something, and the state gives you a 6-month supply at a time. She would collect the unused good medication and distribute it to Latin America, a Trinidadian. See how the universe, God is working for you if you are determined enough, if you are focused enough. And we didn't have a proper structure to get those drugs into Trinidad, so we quickly worked with the doctor assigned to the home, Dr. David John, who's still with the nursery, and with Terry Walker, our Consul General to New York at the time, and we made it happen. Our first shipment left New York in January 2000. And they no longer need my intervention, but having the confidence to say yes, and then lobbying. I'll never forget, Minister Rahal was our Minister of Health at the time. And this is early 2000, Carnival 2000, I will never forget. I had him on Carnival Saturday morning at a meeting with Anthony Fifi at the time, who headed Home Construction Limited, discussing why we need drugs, slightly tight, all of us after girl power, but why we need these drugs for our population. And this is something as a woman, I think we shy away from, that we must use to our advantage. And not in an ugly way, but with pride, with the confidence that Kieran was speaking of. We don't belittle ourselves, but you use your femininity to your advantage. I don't think if I was like a brawny boy, honestly, trying to get those guys out Carnival Saturday after they partied all night to talk HIV, those gentlemen, I would have gotten that response that quickly. I used shamelessly, as men often do, what was my advantage at the time. Recently, I gave up my title as Miss Universe. It was a good opportunity to hang out with me, and it was a good opportunity to get things done. There is no shame in strategically using your strengths, all of them to your advantage, once you're using it for good, which is key. Something else we don't pay particular attention to. But after that meeting, shortly thereafter, and if you go back and you look at, you know, what was happening in the news in Trinidad at the time, Minister Rahal became a serious advocate for HIV, because we didn't meet at Jenny's or one of the usual watering holes. We met at the Sir Ross Nursery. So he had an opportunity to interact with these amazing kids, and he, like I did years before, he fell in love. And that really, he really became a champion for our HIV positive population. Fast forward many years, I do my thing in America, I'm asked to return to Trinidad, and I come back to work at ETech, I'm having the best time of my life, working like a dog. Our government changes, I'm fired from my job. That was an exceptionally difficult time for me. Because, for two reasons. No one ever wants to be fired. That's just never a good thing. But if you are me, there is no such thing as local news speaking about that global brand. And I'd been very careful in terms of how I positioned myself. During my university year and immediately after, I was approached by a huge lingerie company who has done phenomenally well and who has made several careers of models to become one of their girls, but I had to get a boob job. And that wasn't right for me, and I just did not want to see myself half naked in underwear in Times Square. In terms of where I want to go with my life, that was just not something I wanted for me. Now, don't get me wrong, that's a tremendous opportunity. And for a young woman who wants to be a model and is happy doing that primarily and not wanting to do the other things that I saw for myself, that's a great, tremendous opportunity. It wasn't the right one for me. So I understood that in terms of my brand, what I was doing with the United Nations, what I wanted to do here in Trinidad and Tobago, at that time, now it's a different story. We're talking 20 years ago. Now, that's much less of an issue. But at the time, given the direction in which my career was moving, that was not the right move for me. Understanding who I am, what that brand is, and making those calls. So let's fast forward. So now I've developed a brand. I have endorsement deals all over the planet. I have weathered the storm of my pregnancy, which to Trinidadians initially seemed like an immaculate conception. Emphatically was not. But I purposely did not date very publicly, again, in terms of managing my public image, because I looked at, the woman I admired before me who had done it well, the Audrey Hepburns of the world, the Sharon Mbairs of the world, who managed their careers and their careers in entertainment very separately from their private lives. And those were the women I admired and I wanted to be like. And I managed that storm phenomenally well. And then, as I said, I got fired. And that AG fires Wendy headline in the Sunday Express became a regional and then international story. If you are me, that's Fox News calling, BBC, CNN, everybody. The current president of the United States had Rona, his personal assistant, call me to make sure I was okay. And I didn't need to leave Trinidad immediately, because that's never a good thing if the government of Trinidad and Tobago is suing you. My little son at the time, was exactly that, my little son. He was 5 in school. And listening to talk amongst his colleagues and some of his teachers, he came home crying that Monday afternoon, asking me if I'm going to go to jail. That, to this day, despite the many things I have been through and continue to go through, was the most difficult day, bar none, of my life. Kieran knows well, because Kieran was definitely part of my support system at that time. But like Daddy, and like my mom to some extent, but more so like my dad, I got up the Tuesday after. I cried a lot the Monday and Monday night. A lot of time on the phone with this young lady, puffy eyes and everything. I got up that Tuesday. I meticulously meticulously, said my prayers, meditated like I normally do. So I nourished me internally first, and then I meticulously got dressed. Eyebrows in place, I pulled myself together fabulously. One foot in front the other. I had no idea on that Tuesday morning what I was going to do professionally. I had no idea how Trinidadians would react to me, because this is news, and you know our people. The pecan could be sweet and not so much if you're the target of it. But I soldiered through. And I learned in that moment, more than any other, the importance of keeping your mouth shut, of carrying on with dignity, and letting your work speak for you. That hullabaloo which started in 2012, started in 2012, ended in December of 2018. For me, it still goes on for others. That's a long time. That's a very, very long time. And most people look at me and you never assume, that I'm dealing with a court case like that and other things, while pursuing Caribbean's Next Door model, raising my amazing kid, enjoying life, having a good juvie morning. As we all know, those things, life continues. But recognizing what I had built, recognizing the importance of maintaining that, I worked very hard for it, and I was not going to let anyone take that away from me. And that's the nature, I think, of all of our lives, right, ladies? Ups and downs. But facing the challenges with confidence that we will get through them, fabulously well-groomed, eyebrows in place, one foot in front the other, is what has consistently got me through. And also not being ugly and bearing a grudge. Kieran, I promise, last point. And the last point is two things. After that had happened, as I said, I wasn't sure what I would do outside of entertainment and my endorsements, etc., and my radio show professionally. My former chairman, who is now your chairman, Professor Julian, got invited to do a project outside of Trinidad and Tobago and called me to ask me to be a member of his team. Now, you have to appreciate, after this whole lawsuit, the last person I want to hear from is anybody in my past life. But Professor Julian was a very, very tough chairman at ETech, but he was also very kind. He took the time to explain things to us as executive team. He was very much a stickler for process and order, and I appreciated that. I had a tremendous amount of respect for him, so I took that call. And thank God I did, because that afforded me tremendous opportunities professionally outside of Trinidad and Tobago during that period. And then the AG, who sued me, had the unmitigated goal to come up to me at Brian Laura's Carnival Fete to ask me for a picture for his wife. Could you imagine? Now, I had two options. You know, like those scenes in the movies where like you have a bubble in your head playing out, one they put a good cuss on him. One bubble said, and the other one said, no, 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 Wendy, remember who you are. Dignity and kindness. So I was very polite to said AG, love his wife, she's fabulous. Love him less. But I was very, very polite. I took photographs with his wife. And even though we will not and probably will never be friends, now, all of these years later, and even at that time, even while I was going through the ugly, there was no animosity towards him. Nelson Mandela once said, God bless him, resentment is like drinking poison, expecting your enemy to die. So true. I focused on doing me, and I've continued, I'm still in the middle of my journey, but I've continued to excel. And that former enemy, I would like to think, no longer is. Thank you.